All right, so since I'm like hyperactive and shit, um, and I've always been high level or high frequency, um, I'm just thinking about other stuff on the internet. So I'll put this in bits and bytes instead of history propaganda. You know, well, there's some crossover. Um, talking. I'm thinking about like degeneracy naturally and hyperstimulation, hedonism, and maybe I want to say the cult of Dionysus or other aspects of having too much wealth, having too much of everything, right? Because and then I think about tribalism naturally, in have and have nots, and Saudi Arabia, frankly, those oil caliphates. Don't like them very much. Because Dubai was built on slave labor, and if you didn't know that, you know that now. You know, and the waste, the human waste that results from the elitism and the caste system and cultural arrogance, basically, which then correlates to religious dominance and practice, you know, and then you get human trafficking, prostitution, and all this, the dark underbelly of the internet and humanity, and considering, well, DeviantArt and furries, right? It used to be, everybody knows about furries on the internet, honestly, um, and yiffing and the practice of masturbating inside the inside the costume at anime conferences and stuff like that. The cosplay, fantasy, Peter Pan syndrome, trying to be anything or anyone other than who you are instead of being accountable to your actions and trying to, well, okay, maybe isolation and tribalism too, again, because, well, everybody wants to have some sort of social group, and then we all construct within these social groups, a dominance of either wealth, social position, or attractiveness, right? These are the basics of the psychology, the group psychology, and evolutionary psychology for mate selection. This is again well documented, and that comes out in our behaviors, and you know, uh, intelligence can be a tricky thing, and again, the gay community within the furries is known, right? But the two were not. There's a stuff on YouTube about this. The two were not previously, up to a certain point, correlated or related to each other, right? They were not one in the other. But the fursona thing, and then like the pound puppies. I see these military people get dressed up and put masks on, of like Dobermans and whatnot, and it's just like, okay, what's wrong with you? What kind of drugs have you been doing? Um, and this is just what we've been afforded by the hyperstimulation and the hypersaturation of this material, because it never used to be commonplace. It was just a niche thing, and it was better that way. um, Everyone can have what they want and what they need out of a social hierarchy when they find their own people, right? Their own, not weirdness, but perversions, because humanity is perverse, right? Especially we consider the history, um, of our sexuality within cultures. So I think about the Kama Sutra, or the 100 Days of Sodom, and the actual act and the pursuit of demonstration and dating, and finding someone to be with, to procreate, because well, that's the meaning of life, right? Whether we like it or not, is to reproduce. And it's, a lot of people don't like reducing humanity to that. They want to say that, okay, life is more than that. But again, the survival and the propagation of the species depends on the viability and the strength of every individual, because otherwise we get eaten alive by other animals. I look at that mongoose that's over there on the floor, and violence is a part of our existence. And when we try to ignore that, we try to try to placate it, and put it aside, we become too weak, and we become exploited by other cultures who are very well aware and more accepting of our violent nature. And because that's just the reality of our existence. Eat or be eaten, as far as I'm concerned. We just find new and interesting ways to predate upon each other when we have too much of a good thing, right? And the physically weak, or the more intellectually superior, find new masturbatory ways to dominate the stupid, and establish a new stratum of existence, so as to separate themselves from the stupid people, from the more animalistic, but at the same time, um, just end up in the same place, right? Again, the animal farm paradox, in that when you kill the pigs, you'll eventually become them. The aristocracy. We can't get away from that, because human behavior is not as complicated as we think it is. And you know, while I forgive my parents for their errors, right? They're human beings. There's things that have affected me in my life, and things that especially my father, who's had such resistance to technology, and he never really wanted to be part of this. He's honestly more Mennonite in his thoughts, being a classical Catholic, and the seven deadly sins naturally of Catholicism, trying to remain pious and a good Catholic, right? Even though he's Christian now, he doesn't go to a Catholic church, but he still does the rituals and stuff when we go past his home church in Toronto. Um, and I don't blame him for the issues that he's caused me in my life. The fact that he worked in Teen Challenge along with my mother. That's what brought us to London. And he very much didn't understand, or didn't always understand, because he, in his first few years of life, because of tuberculosis or whatever, was in a sanatorium and was separated from his mother. And he's a very particular individual, right? So he has his own weirdness, like I do, and I've inherited some of that. Um, and he didn't always know how to deal with us as children. He had other priorities, and considering the internet, or the overstimulation of certain things, how much time I've spent in front of the computer, or not being involved in social relationships, the interpretation was that I was addicted to the internet, or I was addicted to video games, and that I was, because of his familiarity, and again, when parents, older people that have children, are around each other, and especially when they're within a community of therapy and recuperation, they have a tendency to even address their own children in an analytical, or sinner's lens, right? Or an addict, right? I know this has affected me negatively in a lot of ways, as it has changed how I view the world and my relationships, along with other parts of my social development, um, because of my nature, right? And the fact that I prefer to be around the disabled, to be honest with you, because they don't judge. I'd rather be around those kind of people that just want to exist than I would anybody else. And that's the truth of the matter, because they go through so much themselves. I'd rather be around the addicts. I'd rather be around prostitutes. I'd rather be around the homeless. I would. I would. Than the privileged. Yeah. That's it, really. Yeah, I know that in ways that he's gotten very angry over the years. And the interpretation is as well, if you treat everyone as an addict or as someone that has mental health issues. Again, my father grew up in a household that had conflict in it, because of poverty. My grandfather worked for Molson in Toronto, and my grandmother, she didn't work, right? And she had her breakdown at some point, and my aunt and my father's side had issues. She was raped and had ECT, and so the attitudes of mental health have changed over the years, and drastically so. There wasn't always a support system. Just the anxiety involved with, okay, so if he can't work, if he's not working, then he must have a mental illness, and it's permanent. How am I supposed to deal with this? Now I have to keep working. I have to keep supporting the family. Now my wife wants to separate from me, because she's having a mental breakdown. So on and so forth. Because my parents may not like this, but this is to help other people at the same time. In that, again, recently, within since 2016, and before that, there was always issues because of the income difference and the trying to help family, and the overextension of finances between different properties, the death of my grandmother, my great aunts, two of them, and my cousin within quick succession, within 2 or 3 years. And my mother, she took on a lot of responsibility as power of attorney, and then she also suffered her own injuries, right? Slip and fall with inside a church, and which resulted in a disability. Other traumatic issues that don't get resolved, and where predatory people get involved, and then they've liquidated or leached money out of my parents' retirement accounts, and then the exacerbatory factors of the real estate market, speculation, and multi-generational wealth transfer. There's been a lot of factors. Okay, and even further suffering, like, say, again, a good expose, a little bit of expose for my family, but again, all of us Christians having been subjected to some sort of societal torture and persecution, basically, by other cultures as revenge for the actions of, say, Iraq or Afghanistan. A quid pro quo, and a boxing match, because of historical pretexts, right? Again, we have to, if we don't examine the past, then we have no future. That's the quote, right? If we don't understand where we're coming from, we have no idea where we're going. And this is the society at large, because of jealousy and because of, misinterpretations of historical texts, if not the anger and the anxiety, and then the revenge of over slavery and other forms of warfare, internationally, by North America, if not the British Crown. Hence why I become a target, and other people become a target, for my skin color and my heritage. But I'm not responsible for the actions or the inactions of other people, right? I'm doing everything I can to help other people as best I can from what I've learned about addictions. You know, everywhere I've been, you know, and mental health issues everywhere I've been, isolation, you know, other psychological factors everywhere I've been, as much as I can, because I know what it is to be alone. I know what it is to be ostracized. I know what it is to be isolated. I know what it is to have breakdowns. You know, I've lost my shit in the middle of Northern Ontario after a car blew up, right? And it just, you know, wouldn't turn over for a bit, but then you just have to pick yourself up after you scream and shout at the clouds and the stars and get back to fucking work. Because when you're on your own, there is no other options, and your survival is entirely up to yourself. You can't rely on other people. You have to be prepared for these eventualities, and I've fallen back multiple times upon my scout, you know, my knowledge and my training from scouts and from cadets, for which I'm very thankful. And again, that's why I try to represent cadets and the forces as best I can, like the best spirit possible, because this is what it is to be a man. This is what it is to be a Canadian. You know, what's the point otherwise? If someone offered me millions of dollars, I might doubt what their motivations are. I might feel undeserving because of how much of a life of suffering that I've been through. You know, again, the phrase that I've told to other people is that when you've been browbeaten your entire life, you don't know what a good thing is when you see it, because you're expecting there to be some ulterior motive behind it, right? So you can definitely lose your trust and your positivity of humanity after so many things, a disillusionment rather with society, if not the military, for the abandonment that happens, you know, but also the entitlement or the lack thereof, the lack of self-confidence that comes after. You know, I've done everything I can. How come I'm not being treated very well? It's because of the apathy and the psychopathy of the organization. It's not your fault. It's not the people within it. It's just the fact that the corporation is a psychopath by definition in the law, and that a person is a monster as a definition under the eyes of the law as a legislation. This is just how it is, and it has been for a long time, and that's why it's a problem. Is because we don't see each other as people. We see each other as products, and this is the predatory capitalism and the negative side of it, you know, which has been allowed to happen. We've allowed it. Everyone has allowed it to happen by participating in and by becoming, putting our heads back in the sand, and you know, not being educated. You know, the fantasy land, you know, the Peter Pan syndrome that you know, happened to my generation and a bit older and a bit younger as well. You know, again, but also not entirely our own fault because of the hijacking of the dopamine addictions, right? The predatory nature of the hyper-stimulation that's involved with the you know, the game theory and the programming, right? The propaganda. Excuse me. And so, you know, and when you don't have any friends, all you have is the internet. What else is there to do? You know, again, you got to go out there and you have to get involved in the community. You have to do something in order to find like-minded people. Yeah, it's going to suck because you're going to run into a lot of people you don't get along with. And everybody has, you know, again, during COVID, I was very happy because finally a lot of other people started to feel like I did with my social anxieties and my hyper analytical nature, you know, the PTSD that's involved with that, you know, always being on guard because of, you know, being, you know, more than a lifetime of more than my share of abuse by other people in my youth and bullying. I don't like seeing this. I don't like it going on. But some degree of it has to be there in order for people to understand individual boundaries. It's just that again, more motivations as to why I do these videos. I do the history of propaganda, and now this one, bits and bytes. That we need to change, and if we don't, then we're all dead. This endemic of hedonism, the addiction to stimulation, the serotonin syndrome, is worse than the opioid crisis. It's worse than the methamphetamine. It's worse than the heroin in the 1970s in New York. It's worse than the Summer of Love. It's worse than the barbiturates. It's worse than the opium. It's worse than the alcoholism of the 19th century. Because dopamine and sugar, cocaine, are some of the most powerful substances known to man. And that's why we have laws against them, and why we need levers of control, and why we have this problem. For example, say like in Vancouver, with the government sanctioned drugs that are supplied, in that the people that receive them at these safe injection sites or these detox sites sell the substance after being given it and make a profit. Or the dealers get into the rehab facilities, the detox facilities, and they're just 3 doors down from someone. They knock on your door, and it's just that easy, right? So the only conclusion is that people within politics or within the medical industrial complex want this to continue, and they're pushers. They push these agendas on us. They push these drugs on us to keep us complacent and to keep us under control, right? And this is why I'm not smoking marijuana right now. And when I had the resources, I would go to the reserve, honestly, because there's something wrong with the hyper stimulating marijuana that the Canadian government allows to be produced. Even the lower strength stuff is not good, because they're isolating for certain terpenes and whatnot. And the cannabis plant has hundreds, if not thousands, of cannabinoids. So if you smoke hemp, it's just much more holistic and better for the body. And at one point, maybe I will start smoking again, or eating, taking products for relaxation, and because it can be very, very challenging as a hyper intellectual. That I can't sleep at night sometimes. It's just a matter of fact, right? And again, I support the decriminalization and research of psychedelics for psychotherapy. There's a reason why they've been used throughout history for shamanism and so forth. I just this is why we get burnt out, and this is why we need to change.